South Florida has always been marketed as paradise, a place where glassy condo towers rise against turquoise waters, promising both luxury living and a rock-solid investment. For decades, these high-rises weren't just homes. They were symbols of Florida's unstoppable growth. International investors snapped up units before the foundations were even poured. Retirees bought into the dream of oceanfront living, and developers bragged about billion-dollar skylines. It all felt bulletproof. But in 2025, that dream has cracked wide open. The South Florida condo market, once the pride of the state's economy, is collapsing in real time. Prices are falling, financing has frozen, and thousands of homeowners are stuck with massive repair bills and insurance premiums they can't afford. Entire buildings have been blacklisted by lenders. Families who thought they'd secured a piece of paradise now face financial ruin. Retirees on fixed incomes are being forced to sell, while investors quietly walk away from properties that no longer make sense on paper. The panic has spread beyond the buildings themselves. Realtors complain of endless listings with no offers. Developers are halting projects midstream. Local governments are bracing for shrinking tax revenues. And the once glamorous condo towers of Miami and Fort Lauderdale are now seen by many as ticking time bombs of debt, lawsuits, and uncertainty. Caught in the middle of this chaos is the governor of Florida. For years, he proudly pointed to the condo boom as proof of the state's strength, a beacon of growth that set Florida apart from the rest of the country. But as the cracks have widened into a full-scale collapse, his tone has shifted dramatically. Press conferences once filled with optimism are now dominated by urgent warnings and tense reassurances. Behind closed doors, emergency meetings stretch late into the night. The governor knows this isn't just a housing issue. It's an economic and social crisis that threatens the very image of Florida as a paradise. Tonight, we're breaking down how South Florida's condo empire rose so high, why it's now crumbling, and what the fallout means for the families, investors, and communities caught in the storm. And perhaps most importantly, why the governor himself is freaking out as the state's most important housing market teeters on the edge of disaster. The golden era of condos. To understand today's collapse in South Florida, we first have to revisit the golden era, when condos didn't just shape the market, they were the market. From Miami Beach to Brickell, towers rose as symbols of luxury, promising not just homes, but lifestyles. Rooftop pools, marble lobbies, concierge services, and global prestige. After the 2008 recession, the condo boom roared back stronger than ever. Foreign money from Latin America, Europe, and Canada poured in, treating Miami real estate as a safe investment. Many units sat empty, but the capital kept prices soaring. Developers pre-sold entire towers before breaking ground, fueling a cycle that seemed unstoppable. The boom created an illusion of endless opportunity. Realtors became celebrities, young professionals saw condos as a path to wealth, and retirees dreamed of maintenance-free waterfront living. Local governments thrived on tax revenue, while city leaders proudly showcased the skyline as proof of prosperity. Even the governor pointed to the condo boom as Florida's economic crown jewel. And for a while, it was real. Brickell transformed into a vertical city of nightlife. Sunny Isles became Florida's Riviera, and Fort Lauderdale rebranded itself as the yacht capital of the world. By 2019, units sold out in days, deposits doubled as investments, and remote work transplants during the pandemic pushed prices even higher. For years, it looked like nothing could shake the condo empire. But the very belief that Florida was immune to real estate downturns set the stage for the collapse we're watching unfold today. Cracks in the foundation. For years, the South Florida condo boom seemed unstoppable, but every empire has cracks beneath the surface. What's shocking now is that the warning signs weren't hidden. They were right there in plain sight, slowly spreading through the foundations of the market. Investors, developers, and even the governor himself ignored them, convinced the golden era would last forever. The first cracks came with oversupply. Developers kept building as though demand would never slow down, stacking tower after tower along Miami's skyline. By the late 2010s, pre-construction sales started to lag. International buyers, once the lifeblood of the condo market, began pulling back. Economic turmoil in Latin America and stricter regulations abroad meant fewer investors could wire millions across borders with the same ease as before. Yet construction cranes never stopped. Towers kept rising, even as units remained dark at night. At the same time, the cost of living in South Florida skyrocketed. Condo fees, insurance premiums, and property taxes rose year after year, squeezing middle-class buyers out of the picture. For many locals, the dream of condo ownership became a fantasy. A two-bedroom unit that once sold for $300,000 suddenly cost $700,000, with monthly fees exceeding $1,500. Even before the crash, families and retirees were quietly asking, who can actually afford this anymore? Then came the pandemic-era frenzy, which was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it brought a flood of new buyers from New York, Chicago, and California who wanted to escape lockdowns and enjoy the Florida lifestyle. On the other hand, it created artificial demand. Remote workers with high salaries drove prices far beyond sustainable levels. Condos that had sold for $400,000 just a few years earlier were suddenly flipping for over $1 million. Realtors described bidding wars as madness, but few questioned how long it could last. Meanwhile, an invisible threat was creeping up from the ground: insurance and maintenance costs. Florida's unique geography has always made real estate expensive to insure, but climate risks pushed rates into uncharted territory. Hurricanes, rising seas, and new state regulations forced insurers to raise premiums dramatically. Some owners saw their annual bills double or even triple. At the same time, many older condo buildings were due for major repairs, with millions needed for structural work. Owners faced special assessments they simply couldn't afford, and some walked away. The most chilling reminder of these hidden costs came in June 2021 with the Surfside condo collapse. The tragedy killed 98 people and sent shockwaves through the entire state. Overnight, Floridians were reminded that condo living wasn't just about luxury. It came with risks. Buildings across South Florida suddenly faced stricter inspections, emergency repairs, and staggering costs. For many owners, that was the moment the dream started to feel more like a burden. Still, through all of this, the official message remained upbeat. Developers promised that demand was strong. Realtors brushed off concerns as temporary. And the governor, eager to keep confidence high, spoke of Florida's housing market as one of the strongest in the nation. Behind the scenes, however, even state officials knew that cracks were forming. Reports showed condo delinquency rates climbing, foreign investment slowing, and construction outpacing actual demand. By 2023, the signs were undeniable. Interest rates spiked as the Federal Reserve tried to control inflation. Suddenly, the cheap money that had fueled the boom was gone. Mortgage payments doubled for many buyers. Sales slowed, inventory rose, and still, new projects kept breaking ground. The math no longer made sense, but momentum kept pushing forward. It was like watching a storm gather offshore. Everyone could see it forming, but no one wanted to believe it would make landfall. Owners convinced themselves they could sell before things turned. Developers insisted that wealthy buyers would always come. State leaders hoped Florida's allure would be enough to carry them through. But markets don't bend to optimism. They break when the weight becomes too heavy. And in South Florida, the foundation was already buckling. The governor's breaking point. For months, the governor of Florida stood before cameras with the same steady message. Florida's housing market was strong, resilient, and built to weather any storm. But as the condo collapse deepened into a full-blown crisis, that confidence began to unravel. What once seemed like reassurances now sounded more like denial, and the cracks in the market quickly turned into cracks in his composure. It began with a press conference in Miami, where the governor was expected to outline new measures to stabilize condo prices. Instead, he appeared tense, shuffling papers and repeating the phrase, "temporary correction," as reporters pressed him about plummeting values. Behind him, TV graphics showed charts of falling sales, rising foreclosures, and growing vacancies. The contrast was impossible to ignore. While he spoke of confidence, the numbers painted a picture of collapse. As weeks passed, the pressure mounted. Residents who had invested their life savings into condos began showing up at town halls and public hearings. Retirees demanded answers about why their homes had lost 30% of their value in less than a year. Young professionals asked why they were paying mortgages on units now worth less than their debt. Small investors who had purchased multiple condos during the boom told stories of tenants leaving and rental income drying up. One man described himself as a landlord with no rent and no exit. These meetings became tense spectacles, broadcast on local news and shared across social media. And each time the governor appeared, the frustration grew louder. Shouts of "fix this" and "we're drowning" became common refrains. For the first time, his once confident image as the steward of Florida's booming economy seemed to falter. The breaking point came when several major condo projects announced bankruptcy filings within weeks of each other. Towers that had been marketed as symbols of Miami's future suddenly stood half-empty, with construction halted and lawsuits flying. Developers blamed rising costs, shrinking demand, and insurance crises. Buyers who had put down deposits demanded refunds. And lenders, already nervous, began pulling financing from other projects. The domino effect had begun. Faced with the cascading failures, the governor convened emergency meetings with developers, banks, and city officials. Leaked reports revealed that the discussions were far more frantic than his public tone suggested. Internal memos described severe systemic risk and warned of widespread defaults if action wasn't taken quickly. While the governor publicly insisted that Florida remained attractive to investors, privately, he was alarmed. The panic spilled into the financial sector. Local banks that had issued large loans for condo construction started tightening credit. Some refused to extend lines to developers already overleveraged. Rumors of bank instability swirled, reminding many Floridians of the 2008 collapse. Although the governor tried to reassure depositors that the system was sound, even small signs of financial stress sparked fear. Meanwhile, the media painted a vivid picture of his struggle to control the narrative. Headlines read, "Governor scrambles to contain condo fallout," and "Florida's housing dream turns nightmare." News outlets aired footage of him looking visibly shaken during press conferences, his voice sharp and impatient as he fielded questions he couldn't answer. The frustration wasn't just economic, it was emotional. For many Floridians, condos weren't simply investments. They were homes, retirement plans, and symbols of hard-earned success. Now, families were watching those dreams crumble. One heartbreaking story told of a widowed retiree in Fort Lauderdale who had sold her family house to move into a beachfront condo. 2 years later, her building announced $80,000 in repair assessments while her unit value dropped by nearly half. "This was supposed to be my last move," she told reporters, tears streaming down her face. "Now I don't know what's left." Each story like this added to the pressure on the governor. His job wasn't to assign blame, but to manage chaos. And in this crisis, chaos was winning. His attempts to stabilize the market, offering temporary tax relief, promising insurance reform, and pushing for federal disaster-style aid, were met with skepticism. To residents watching their wealth evaporate, these gestures felt too little, too late. In the end, the governor's breaking point wasn't one dramatic moment, but a slow, visible unraveling. The more he insisted the market would bounce back, the more desperate he appeared. And as condo values continued to sink, the image of Florida as a land of prosperity collapsed right alongside the glass towers that once symbolized its success. Lives in free fall. Behind the headlines and falling charts are the people whose lives have been turned upside down. For them, this isn't just a real estate correction. It's a personal catastrophe. Take Maria Alvarez, a nurse who saved for years to buy her first condo in Kendall. She closed on a 2-bedroom in 2022 for $480,000, proud of her accomplishment. But less than 3 years later, her unit's value has dropped nearly 40%, her insurance doubled, and her building announced a $25,000 repair assessment. "It feels like a trap," she said. "I worked so hard, and now I'm losing everything." Retirees, long the backbone of Florida's condo culture, are just as vulnerable. Many sold family homes to downsize into high-rises, expecting stress-free retirement. Now, some can't keep up with rising fees, yet selling means taking a crushing loss. One couple in Fort Lauderdale called their condo a forever home that turned into a sinking ship. Younger buyers are also caught in the collapse. Kevin Chen, a 32-year-old software developer, bought a pre-construction Brickell unit as an investment. By the time it opened, his mortgage costs had doubled while values sank. "I thought I was being smart," he admitted. "Now I feel like I'm drowning in debt." Even renters aren't safe. As investors scramble to cover their losses, rents have spiked. Families are being forced to move again and again, caught in the fallout of a market they never chose to play in. The emotional toll is heavy: sleepless nights, mounting debt, and a growing sense of shame. On social media and in community groups, one phrase repeats again and again: "I feel trapped." The governor can talk about market corrections all he wants, but for ordinary Floridians, the crash has already rewritten their futures. The governor's dilemma. As the condo collapse deepened, one figure found himself under more pressure than anyone else: the governor of Florida. For years, he had championed the state's housing boom as proof of prosperity. Developers stood beside him at ribbon cuttings, and speeches celebrated Florida as the land of opportunity. But now, with the market unraveling, those same images have come back to haunt him. The governor's panic isn't just about numbers on a chart. It's about the tidal wave of problems landing on his desk all at once. Insurance companies pulling out, homeowners drowning in repair assessments, lenders blacklisting entire buildings, retirees begging for relief. Every day brings new crises. His team has been holding late-night meetings, scrambling to find solutions that don't exist in simple sound bites. One of the biggest fears is that the condo collapse could trigger a broader economic downturn. Property taxes are the lifeblood of local governments, and as condo values sink, city budgets face shortfalls. That means fewer resources for schools, infrastructure, and emergency services. The governor knows that if confidence disappears completely, the damage won't stop at the coast. It will ripple across the entire state. At public events, his tone has shifted. Gone are the triumphant boasts about growth. In their place are tense reassurances. He warns about difficult months ahead and urges lenders, insurers, and condo boards to work together to find solutions. Yet behind closed doors, advisors say he is deeply unsettled. One aide described the atmosphere as controlled chaos, with the governor demanding daily updates and snapping at staff when the news gets worse. The toughest challenge is that no single lever of power can fix what's happening. He can't lower mortgage rates. He can't force insurers to cut premiums. He can't erase the billion-dollar repair bills tied to aging towers. All he can do is react and hope that confidence doesn't collapse faster than the buildings themselves. Critics whisper that he underestimated the risks, that Florida's boom was always too good to last. Supporters argue that no one could have predicted the perfect storm of rising rates, surging insurance, and safety reforms hitting all at once. The governor himself has stopped assigning blame. Instead, he's trying to project control, even as his voice tightens in press conferences and his aides shuffle nervously in the background. For a man used to speaking about Florida's future with certainty, this condo crisis has shaken his confidence. He's not just managing an economic downturn. He's fighting to preserve the image of Florida as a paradise worth investing in. And right now, that image is cracking as fast as the concrete in some of Miami's aging towers. The domino effect on Florida's economy. The condo collapse isn't just about homeowners and high-rises. It's sending shockwaves through Florida's entire economy. Real estate has always been the state's golden engine, driving everything from construction jobs to local government budgets. But when condos stumble, the ripple spreads fast. Construction crews are among the first to feel it. Projects that once promised years of steady work are suddenly on hold. Developers, fearing oversupply and lack of buyers, are shelving ambitious towers before they even break ground. For contractors and laborers, the slowdown means layoffs and empty paychecks. Banks and lenders are nervous too. With entire buildings blacklisted, mortgage approvals are drying up. Financing for new projects is shrinking, and smaller banks tied closely to condo lending are bracing for potential defaults. Investors who once saw Florida as a guaranteed win are reassessing, pulling money towards safer bets in other states. Local businesses aren't immune either. Furniture stores, interior designers, staging companies, landscapers, even restaurants near condo hubs, all depend on thriving residential communities. As sales stall and units sit empty, those businesses face slower seasons, thinner margins, and in some cases, closures. Then there's the impact on local governments. Property taxes rise and fall with home values. And in places like Miami-Dade and Broward, condos represent a massive slice of the tax base. With assessments plunging, city leaders face hard choices: cut services, raise rates, or both. Infrastructure projects planned during the boom may now be delayed or abandoned. And above it all looms the question of Florida's reputation. For decades, the state sold itself as a haven for investors, retirees, and dreamers. But as headlines of collapsing markets, runaway insurance, and blacklisted condos spread, that reputation risks being tarnished. Confidence, the most fragile currency of all, is slipping. And if investors no longer trust Florida's promise, the consequences could outlast this downturn by years. Paradise in peril. Florida was built on a dream: sunshine, opportunity, and endless growth. For a time, that dream seemed unshakable. Condo towers rose like glass castles, and buyers poured in from every corner of the world. But the events of 2025 have exposed how fragile that dream really is. Behind the glittering skyline, families are struggling, retirees are panicking, and entire communities are bracing for change. What was once a symbol of paradise has become a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the strongest markets can crack under pressure. The governor's panic reflects more than politics or economics. It's the recognition that Florida's identity itself is at stake. If the condo collapse continues to spread, it won't just be about housing values. It will reshape how the world sees Florida and how Floridians see themselves. The golden beaches are still there, the sun still shines, but the confidence that fueled the boom has been shaken to its core. And now, the state faces a choice: rebuild that trust carefully, or risk watching its greatest symbol of prosperity crumble into history. In the end, the story of South Florida's condo crash isn't just about towers of glass and steel. It's about the people who live in their shadows, wondering if their dream of paradise has turned into a nightmare.